The execution chamber had a way of stealing sound. Even the hum of electricity felt muted, as if the room itself understood what it was built for and chose silence out of respect or cruelty. The walls were bare concrete, stained by time and memory, and the air carried a sharp, sterile smell that clung to the lungs. At the center of the room sat Daniel Mercer, hands cuffed in front of him, ankles chained to the metal chair, bolted into the floor. He had stopped counting the hours sometime before dawn. Time behaved strangely on a day like this. Minutes stretched into lifetimes, then collapsed into nothing at all. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second a small hammer striking what remained of his composure. Daniel was 34 years old. He looked older. The orange jumpsuit hung loose on his frame, fabric wrinkled from a night without sleep. His dark hair had begun to gray at the temples, not from age, but from the years he had spent waiting for appeals, waiting for decisions, waiting for this final morning. His eyes were fixed on a small crack in the wall across from him, as if staring hard enough might widen it into an escape. Two guards stood several feet away. They had been assigned this chamber dozens of times before. They knew the routine, the steps, the professional distance required. Still, neither spoke. One of them shifted his weight occasionally, boots scraping softly against the floor. The other avoided looking directly at Daniel, his gaze drifting instead to the clipboard in his hands. A door opened behind them. Warden Hale entered quietly, accompanied by a man in a dark suit who carried himself with the restrained seriousness of someone who had delivered bad news for a living. The chaplain followed last, clutching a worn Bible to his chest. "Mr. Mercer," the warden said, his voice low and controlled, "we're ready to proceed." Daniel didn't look up right away. He took a slow breath, then another, as if storing air in his lungs for something important. When he finally raised his head, his eyes were clear, too clear for a man about to die. "I have one last request," he said. The words landed heavily in the room. The chaplain nodded, already expecting a prayer, a letter, perhaps a final phone call. "Yes," the warden replied, cautious. Daniel swallowed. His throat felt dry, and for the first time that morning, his hands trembled slightly. "I want to see my dog." The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't procedural. It wasn't rehearsed. The guards exchanged quick glances. The man with the clipboard frowned. "Your dog," he repeated, unsure he had heard correctly. "Max," Daniel said, his voice softening in a way that startled everyone present. "He's a German shepherd, brown eyes, scar on his left ear." His lips curved into the faintest smile, fragile as glass. "He used to wait by the door every night, even when I came home late." The chaplain shifted uncomfortably. The warden exhaled slowly through his nose. "That's highly unusual," he said. "We don't, I know." Daniel interrupted gently. There was no defiance in his tone, only acceptance. "I know it's not protocol. I know you'll probably say no." He paused, eyes dropping to his cuffed hands. "But he's all I have left. I don't want the last thing I see to be this room." Something flickered across the warden's face. Hesitation, conflict. He had heard countless last wishes. Some angry, some absurd, some heartbreaking, but none had been this simple. "How long has it been since you saw him?" the chaplain asked quietly. Daniel closed his eyes. 7 years, he said. "The day they arrested me, he tried to jump into the car when they took me away, wouldn't stop barking. They had to hold him back." His voice cracked for the first time. "I don't know if he even remembers me." The room felt heavier now, as if the walls had leaned inward. The warden looked at the guards, then at the clock. Time was tight, rules were strict, and yet "I'll see what I can do," he said at last. Daniel lifted his head sharply, disbelief flashing across his face. "You will. No promises," the warden replied. "But I'll make a call." As the warden turned toward the door, Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His chest ached, not with fear this time, but with something far more dangerous, hope. He stared at the door long after it closed, heart pounding, unaware that this single request, this one fragile thread to a life he thought was already over, was about to change everything. The wait was worse than the sentence itself. Daniel sat alone again after the warden left, the echoes of footsteps fading down the corridor. The guards resumed their positions, faces carefully neutral, but the atmosphere had changed. The sterile certainty of the execution chamber was cracked now, infiltrated by something unpredictable. Hope was dangerous like that. Minutes passed, or maybe it was only seconds. Daniel had no way of knowing. His pulse thudded in his ears, louder than the ticking clock. Every time a sound drifted down the hallway, a door closing, a distant voice, his heart jumped, then sank when nothing happened. He forced himself to breathe slowly, in through the nose, out through the mouth. He had learned that trick in his first year on death row, during nights when panic crept in like a living thing. But this was different. This wasn't fear of dying. This was fear of being disappointed. He told himself not to expect anything. The warden had made no promises. Procedures existed for a reason. Dogs didn't belong in execution chambers. Last wishes were usually symbolic, not living, breathing reminders of everything a man had lost. Daniel stared down at his cuffs. The metal bit into his wrists, cold and unforgiving. He wondered what Max would think if he saw him like this, smaller, thinner, broken. The thought hurt more than the chains. A guard cleared his throat. Daniel looked up instinctively. Nothing. The guard quickly looked away. Another stretch of silence. The chaplain sat nearby now, hands folded, eyes lowered. Even he seemed unsure what to say. Comfort felt inappropriate when the ending was supposed to be final. Then it happened. A sound, faint, distant, but unmistakable, a bark. Daniel froze. His breath caught halfway in his chest. For a moment he thought his mind was playing tricks on him, conjuring ghosts out of desperation. Death row was full of men who swore they heard things that weren't there. Then it came again, closer this time. The bark echoed down the corridor, sharp and urgent, followed by the scrape of claws against polished concrete. The guards stiffened. One of them turned fully toward the door. The chaplain's head snapped up, eyes wide. Daniel's vision blurred. Max, he whispered, the name escaping him before he could stop it. The door swung open. A handler stepped in first, gripping a leash with both hands, and at the end of it Max. The German shepherd was older now. His muzzle had gone gray, and his body carried the stiffness of age, but his eyes were the same. Sharp, alert, searching. His ears flicked forward the instant he entered the room, nose lifting as he inhaled deeply. Then his gaze locked onto Daniel. For half a second the dog didn't move. The handler tightened his grip, unsure. "Easy, boy," he murmured. Max let out a low whine, a sound pulled straight from his chest. His tail began to wag, slow at first, then faster, as recognition flooded in. His entire body leaned forward, straining against the leash. Daniel's knees nearly gave out. He leaned forward in the chair as far as the chains allowed, tears spilling freely now. "Hey, buddy," he said, voice breaking. "It's okay. It's me." The handler hesitated, then looked toward the warden, who had entered silently behind them. The warden studied the scene, jaw tight, then gave a small nod. The leash was loosened. Max didn't need to be told twice. He surged forward, nails clicking wildly, and stopped just inches from Daniel, as if afraid he might disappear. He sniffed Daniel's hands, his face, his chest, tail whipping the air. Then, with a soft, broken sound, he pressed his head against Daniel's knee and sat down hard, leaning his full weight into him. Daniel sobbed openly now. He bent as much as he could, resting his forehead against Max's head, breathing in the familiar scent of fur and dust and something uniquely his. "You remembered," he whispered. "You didn't forget me." Max looked up at him, brown eyes shining, and licked the tears from his face. No one in the room spoke. One guard wiped his eyes with the back of his glove, pretending to adjust his sleeve. The chaplain pressed a hand to his mouth. Even the handler stood frozen, watching the reunion unfold with disbelief. Max suddenly shifted, placing himself more firmly against Daniel, body angled outward. A low rumble vibrated in his chest, not aggressive, but protective. His eyes flicked briefly toward the guards, then back to Daniel, as if to say, "This one is mine." The warden felt a chill crawl up his spine. This was no longer just a last wish. Something had changed, and everyone in that room felt it. The growl was soft, almost restrained, but it sliced through the room sharper than any shout. Max shifted his stance, paws planted firmly on the concrete, body angled between Daniel and everyone else. The leash trailed uselessly behind him now. He wasn't attacking. He wasn't panicking. He was doing what he had always done best. Protecting. The handler took an instinctive step forward, then stopped. Something in the dog's posture made him hesitate. Years of training told him this wasn't defiance. It was intent. Easy. The handler murmured again, but this time his voice lacked authority. Max didn't move. Daniel felt it then, the tension running through the room like a live wire. He lifted his head slowly, one hand resting against Max's neck. The fur was warm, solid, real. His heartbeat began to slow for the first time that day. "It's okay, boy," Daniel whispered. "I'm right here." Max glanced up at him, ears flicking back briefly, then returned his gaze to the guards. The low rumble faded, replaced by an alert stillness that was somehow more unsettling. The warden cleared his throat. "That's enough," he said, though there was no real command behind it. He looked at the clock again, then at Daniel. "We need to proceed." The chaplain took a step forward. "Warden, with respect," he said quietly, "perhaps we could allow a few more minutes." The warden hesitated. He had never delayed an execution for a dog before. But he had also never seen this, never felt a room so utterly suspended, as if everyone present sensed they were standing at the edge of something irreversible. Daniel lifted his eyes. "Sir," he said, his voice steady now, "I won't resist. I won't cause trouble. I just let him stay until the end." The words hit harder than any plea for mercy. The warden's jaw tightened. He nodded once. 5 minutes. No one argued. Daniel rested his forehead against Max's again, breathing him in, committing every detail to memory. "You did good," he murmured. "You always did." Max responded by sitting even closer, his weight a quiet promise. His tail thumped once against the floor, then it happened. Max's ears snapped upright, his body stiffened, not with warning but recognition. He lifted his head, sniffing the air sharply, then turned his gaze toward the door behind the guards. A distant voice echoed down the corridor. "Wait." Footsteps, fast, urgent. The guards spun around just as the door burst open. A man in a suit rushed in, breathing hard, papers clutched in his hand. "Stop the execution," he shouted. "We have a stay. New evidence just cleared final review." For a split second, no one moved. "What?" the warden demanded. "The DNA reanalysis," the man said, thrusting the papers forward. "The K9 unit evidence from 7 years ago. It was misattributed. The K9 that identified the scent trail." He pointed at Max. "That dog flagged inconsistencies back then. The report was dismissed." The room seemed to tilt. Daniel stared, not understanding. What are you saying?" The man swallowed. "I'm saying the evidence used to convict you is compromised. The execution is halted, effective immediately." Silence crashed down harder than before. The chaplain gasped. One guard whispered, "Jesus." Daniel's hands shook violently now. "I don't," he laughed once, broken and disbelieving. "I don't understand." Max did. The dog let out a sharp bark, not alarmed, not aggressive, but triumphant. His tail wagged furiously as he turned back to Daniel, pressing his head into his chest. The handler stared, stunned. That dog, he was part of the original case, he said slowly, a tracking K9 reassigned after the trial. The warden looked down at Max, then back at Daniel. His voice was hoarse. "Your last wish," he said quietly, "just saved your life." Daniel collapsed forward, arms wrapping as best they could around Max's neck, sobbing uncontrollably now, not from fear, not from loss, but from the overwhelming shock of still being alive. "I knew," he whispered into Max's fur. "You never stopped trying, did you?" Max licked his face, tail thudding against the floor like a heartbeat returned. As the chains were unlocked and the guards stepped back, no one rushed. No one spoke. Every person in that room understood one thing with absolute clarity. This wasn't coincidence. This was loyalty, and sometimes the one who knows the truth best walks on four legs.